Good afternoon, students. Welcome back to the session. Today, we'll be going to discuss regarding a process scheduling. So, what are the different scheduling objectives and what are the different scheduling criteria and what are the different times we need to know in order to do a process scheduling? All the things we'll be going to see in the today's class. So before going to this process scheduling, so let me give you a detail or a brief introduction regarding a process. Like what do you mean by a process? Why scheduling is necessary? Like as we all know, a process is nothing but a program in execution. So when a process is getting from ready state to running state, then a program is going to be converted into process as we have all seen it. Fine, suppose this is the ready state and this is the running state. Fine. So here when we are admitting any task, this task we call it as a program. Fine. This task we call it as a program. When this program has been admitted or when has been shifted from ready state to running state, this program will convert into process. Fine. So that is the major difference between the program and a process. So now in this session, we'll be going to discuss like why scheduling is important. Fine. Scheduling is very, very important for the processes. Why? Because we'll be going to have number of processes. Like we can't say only two processes will be there, only three processes will be there, or only a finite number of processes will be there. So based on the work we are having, like we'll be going to have many number of processes. So all the processes we'll be going to admit initially in the new state. At the initial stage, all the processes will be over here. From the new state, we'll be going to get those processes into the ready state. So ready state means like where the processes are willing to get the CPU time. So they are waiting in the ready state. From the ready state, we'll be going to get the processes into running state. So after running state, we'll be going to take the processes out of this call it as an exit state. Suppose if any, it needs of any IO operation. So in case of any IO operation, it has to be done in the sense it will be going to admit in the waiting state. When it has done with the IO operation, again it will be readmitted into the ready state. So this is the 5 chain state process we'll be going to follow. Like each and every process will be going through, not specifically like it is not must and should it has to go into the waiting state, but all the remaining states are common for each and every process. New state, all the processes will be admitted in the new state, and from the new state we'll be going to select the processes from new state to the running state, and from running state to the ready state to the running state. So this is how we'll be going to have the process. So now we'll be going to discuss like why scheduling is needed. So here our main topic is process scheduling. So, what do you mean by scheduling? So, what do you mean by scheduling in the sense like arranging a processes or giving the processes in a right way, that we call it as a scheduling. So, here we are going to have n number of processes. So, all these are processes, but we are going to have only one CPU which is going to execute all the processes. Suppose here the processes are from P0 to Pn. So all these processes, like we want to give a CPU time for all these processes. So if we are not going to schedule the processes properly, like we will not be able to get the effective utilization of the processor. So let me differentiate between a process and a processor. Process is nothing but a program. That program, when we are admitting in the running state, that will turn into process. Processor is nothing but the central processing unit. So that is the difference between process and a processor. So here P0 to Pn are the processes, and this is the processor. Fine. So that is the difference, processes and the processor. So here we have to give for each and every process, the CPU time should be given. So why scheduling is needed in the sense, like we can't give all the processes like this. Whenever they are admitted, we can't give the processes all like this into the CPU. We need to schedule the things. Like for suppose in our daily life also, we are going to schedule our things, or schedule our routine. Like at this time we have to do this, at next time we have to do this. So if you are going to have a proper scheduling, like when you are preparing for your exams, you will be going to schedule the units. Like this day I have to complete 1 unit, this day 2.5 units I have to complete. Like means you will be going to get an idea. Like if you are scheduling the things will be going good. If you are not scheduling, it will be going worse. Like you don't have any scheduling, you just keep on reading like that. Like if you are not keeping any such targets, you will not complete the full syllabus what you are expected to read. So in the same manner, when it is applicable to process scheduling, like we are going to have many number of processes, so we have to give time for each and every process. So what we are going to do is, suppose a P1 is there, and P2 and P3. Fine. So P1 is going to take 3 milliseconds of time, and P2 is going to take 4 milliseconds of time, and P3 is going to take 1 millisecond of time. Fine. Here many of the processes. Let me give an example why scheduling is needed. Fine. So when it comes to the P3, so as it is the first one, normally we'll be going to give this process P1 to the CPU. It will be executing 3 minutes of time, and next process, after completing of process P1, like we'll be going to give the second chance of this is a process P2. So process P2 is going to execute for 4 milliseconds of time, and process P1 has been executed for 3 milliseconds of time. So here process P2 executed for 4 milliseconds, and process P1 executed for 3 milliseconds. Totally how much? P1 plus P2 is equal to process P1 plus process P2 took 7 milliseconds of time. So P3 has to wait 7 milliseconds of time in order to complete 1 millisecond of time. Is it not? So P3 actually needs 1 millisecond of CPU time. But how much time it has been wasted? 7 milliseconds of time it was keep on waiting in order to get 1 millisecond of time. So if you are not scheduling, the things will be like this. Suppose if you are going to schedule the processes, first I'll make to do P3, and then I'll be going to make P1, and then I'll be going to make P4. Fine. So P3 in the sense it is going to take 1 millisecond of time, and P1 in the sense 3 milliseconds of time, and P2 in the sense 4 milliseconds of time. So this process shouldn't wait for that much long time in order to complete its 1 millisecond of time. So that is the difference between scheduling and if you are not scheduling. So for the processes, we need a scheduling. So we are having different scheduling algorithms, and we are having different scheduling objectives, like how to achieve a proper scheduling, like what are the objectives of a proper scheduling. So in order to achieve a proper scheduling, what are the different criteria we are going to have, like what are the different times we are going to have, everything we'll be going to see in this session. Fine. So here, when we are going to talking regarding the scheduling objectives. So scheduling objectives in the sense, the first and the foremost thing which it comes comes is like being fair. Fair is nothing but like we have to take the all the processes. So being fair in the sense, like we have to give the processes, like we have to see all the processes in an equal way. Fair should be there. So we should not give large processes should be given priority, much like that we shouldn't think of. All process should be treated equally. So maximize the throughput. So what do you mean by a throughput? Like all these things we'll be going to see in the next slides. Throughput is nothing but number of instructions executed per unit time. So this we call it as a throughput. How many number of instructions you have completed per unit time? The throughput should be high, very high. So we have to make the CPU as much busy as possible. So if you are going to make the CPU as much busy as possible, then the throughput is always going to be high. So that is the how a throughput is going to be measured. Number of instructions executed per unit time. Suppose in 5 minutes, how many instructions you have done? In 5 minutes, if you have done only one instruction or two instruction, in the sense the throughput is very low. In 5 minutes, if you are going to do like 7 instructions, 6 instructions, in the sense the throughput is going to be high. That actually we are in need of. The throughput should be as high as possible. So when we are going to do the scheduling, the main objective is we have to execute number of tasks per unit is going to be more. So that in that way we have to schedule the processes. Next one is maximize number of users receiving acceptable response times. So when we are going to see the response time should be high. Response time in the sense the output, like at how with how much minimum time we are getting our response, that should be high. Be predictable. Be predictable in the sense like we have to be in a predictable thing. Like suppose if P1 is having 4 milliseconds of burst time and P2 is having 1 millisecond of burst time, like we have to be predictable in the sense like we are thinking that P2 is waiting for 4 milliseconds. In order to complete it's 1 millisecond. So if you are predicting this, means we'll be going to allow P2 first and then P1 later. So that prediction should be there. Balanced resource use. Balanced resource use in the sense, suppose you are having 5 resources. I mean 5 resources like a printer, and second one is scanner, and third one is some memory, or some fourth one is some mouse you are having. So all these are the resources. We have to balance all these resources. Suppose if n number of tasks are there, in the sense, suppose for this n number of tasks, we should not allocate all the major of the task to the printer or major of the task to the scanner. Like what we have to do is, what is the main objective is, we have to utilize the resources in a better way. Like how we are going to utilize the resources, in the sense, suppose if 3 tasks are there, so one task should be given printer, and if 3 tasks are in need of printer, scanner, so 3 tasks are there, 3 tasks are in need of printer and scanner. We shouldn't allocate all the 3 to the printer or all the 3 to the scanner. We have to allocate first process to the printer, second process to the scanner, and the third process is going to be waiting. After completing the first process, you will be going to allocate the third process to the printer. Like that, we have to use the resources, or we have to balance the resources in a proper way. And next one is avoid indefinite postponement. Like we should not postpone the tasks. So that means like suppose if P1 needs 1 millisecond of time and P2 needs 6 milliseconds of time and P3 needs 5 milliseconds of time. So suppose P1 has done. When we are going for the P2, but P3 is having less amount of time. So what we'll be going to do is, okay, let us second we'll be going to execute P3. And when we are executing P3, another process came which is of 1 millisecond of time. So what we are going to do, as it is 1 millisecond of time, let us wait P2 for some other time, some more time, and let us execute P4. Like that, what we are going to do, we are postponing the things. So this postponement should not be done. So like if you are postponing, means like it will get into a starvation stage, which is not at all entertained. So that what is a starvation and everything we'll be going to see when it comes to the scheduling algorithms. So postponement shouldn't be more. And next one is enforce priorities. Enforcing priorities in the sense, suppose if P1, P2, P3 processes are there. Suppose P2 is having the first highest priority and P3 is having the second highest priority and P1 is having the third priority. So what we have to do is enforce priorities. Like we have to follow the priorities in order to have a better scheduling paradigm. So As we are having P2 a first priority, we have to allow the P2 process to execute first. Even though P1 process is first in the queue, but we are not allowing the P1 process to execute by the CPU. We'll be going to give chance to the P2 process. Why? Because it is going to have the highest priority. Like when it comes to your normal daily routine also, like normal days you will be going to give priority in order to go out or in order to watch movies, something like that. But when it comes to the exams, you will be going to give highest priority to the exams. So your priorities will change based on the situation. In the same manner, here also the process priorities are also going to be changed. So based on the task what we are going to do and based on the situations, these process priorities are also going to be changed. So we have to consider those priorities and we have to look after the processes. So that is the enforce priorities. Next, give preference to processes holding key resources. Priorities is the one like highest priority. And suppose we are telling to give preference to the processes which are holding resources. So suppose process P1 is there, P1 holded the printer resource. Fine. If process P1 completed, then only it is going to release that printer. Then only that printer can be utilized by the P2 process. If P1 process doesn't complete, it is not going to release the printer. So P2 is keep on waiting. So what we have to do is, what are the things we have to do in order to complete a process P1? So that we have to do first, so that the process P1 will complete its task and it is going to release the printer, and that printer is going to be utilized by the process P2. So we have to give preference to the processes holding the key resources. So which are holding the resources, in order to utilize the resources by the other processes, we have to give preference to the processes which are holding the resources. That is also the one of the major objective of a scheduling. And next one is give better service to process that have desirable behavior patterns. So desirable behavior patterns in the sense like you will be going to get in the you will be going to understand when it comes to an example. So when we are going to have the chaining properties, like we have to give preference to those processes. And next one is degrade gracefully under heavy loads. So when we under heavy loads, what we have to do is, suppose process P1 needs 5 milliseconds and process P2 needs 20 milliseconds and process P3 needs 2 milliseconds. What we have to do is, we have to degrade this process. Why? Because it needs CPU time of 20 milliseconds, but process P3 needs only 2 milliseconds of time. For completion of 2 milliseconds of time, it has to wait 20 milliseconds of time. So in order to have a better scheduling environment, what we have to do is, we have to degrade this P2 process so that P3 can be done. After P3, we'll be going to give a chance for the P2 process in order to complete its task. So these are the major objectives, scheduling objectives. In order to have a better scheduling, so these are the objectives we need to follow. And next one is the policies to schedule a process. What are the good policies? So first we'll be going to discuss regarding the burst time. Burst time is nothing but total amount of time required by the process to complete its task. Suppose, for example, let me take myself. So what is the burst of time of mine is 1 hour. So in order to deliver my subject, in order to deliver my topic, what the department has given the burst time is 1 hour of time. That is from, today it is from 3:30 to 4:30. So that is the burst time. Burst time is nothing but time required by the process to complete its task. So how much time it is in require of 1 hour? Even though, of course, my topic will not complete in 1 hour also, but what is the time they have given burst time, in the sense the time which is going to take by the process in order to complete. So that we call it as a burst time. So burst time is nothing but, so every process in a computer requires some amount of time. So this time includes the CPU time as well as the IO time. So we are in need of IO time as the CPU time. So burst time is equals to the IO time plus CPU time. So total we call it as a burst time. So IO time plus CPU time. So CPU time in the sense the process which is going to execute in the CPU, how much time it has taken, that we call it as a CPU time. And IO time in the sense, suppose if you are going to talk regarding the printer, the process, how much time it has taken, hold the printer, and how much time it has executed this printer in the sense, that we call it as an IO time. Totally this IO time plus CPU time, we call it as a burst time. Fine, but we don't consider majorly the IO time. We'll be going to consider the CPU time majorly. So burst time is the total time. It is the total time taken by the process for the execution on the CPU. We call it as a burst time. Burst time in the sense how much time a process is needed in order to complete its task in the CPU only, but not in the IO. That we call it as a burst time. And the next time is arrival time. What do you mean by arrival time? So what is the arrival time of mine is, like it has to be like at sharp 3:30. 3:30 I have to deliver the class. That is the arrival time. That means when the process has arrived, that time we call it as an arrival time. So arrival time is the time when the process enters into the ready state. As we all know, like we'll be going to have the new state, and we'll be going to have the ready state, and we'll be going to have the running state. So these are the states, and the next we'll be going to have the exit state. So arrival time is the time when the process enters into the ready state. From new state, a process entered into the ready state. This time when it has admitted in the ready state, this time we call it as an arrival time. So here in this example, the process P1 arrival time is 0 milliseconds, process P2 arrival time is 1 millisecond, and process P3 arrival time is 2 milliseconds. Burst time is, as I have already said, in order to complete a task, a process need 8 milliseconds of time. In order to complete P1 process, that process needs 8 milliseconds of time in order to complete its work. And P2 process needs 7 milliseconds of time in order to complete its task, as well as the 10 milliseconds of time is required by the P3 process in order to complete its task. So these times we call it as a burst times. Arrival times in the sense, from the new state, when the process has admitted in the ready state, that time we said to be an arrival time. Here in the example, this P1 arrival time is 0, P2 arrival time is 1 millisecond, and P3 time is 2 milliseconds. So arrival time means here entering into the ready state. Exit time means when it has exit out of the process. So that we call it as an exit time. So exit time is the time when the process completes its execution and exited from the system. We call it as an exit time. So arrival time, exit time, and the burst time. And next one is a response time. So response time is very, very important. Response time means how much time, within how much time you got the response. That we call it as a response time. So here response time means, like in short we can say as, like when the process first gets its CPU time minus arrival time, we call it as a response time. So here if you have taken the example over here, process P1 arrival time is 0 milliseconds, and it need 8 milliseconds to complete its task. And process P2 arrival time is 1 millisecond, it needs 7 milliseconds to complete its task. And third one is process P3 arrival time is 2 milliseconds, it needs 10 milliseconds to complete its task. So response time is the time spent when the process in the ready state and gets the CPU for the first time. So that time we call it as a response time. So here, for example, if you are taking this example, here P1 response time is 0 milliseconds. Fine, as arrival time is there, so it has when it is going to have the response time in the sense at 0 milliseconds. Here the P2 response time is 7 milliseconds. How the P2 response time is 7 milliseconds? So what is the definition of a response time? So time at which the process gets the CPU for the first time. So P2, at what time it got its process? Suppose if you are drawing the NAT chart, so here at 0 milliseconds P1 process entered. Fine. P1 process entered. Burst time in the sense P1 process took 8 milliseconds. So P1 process took 8 milliseconds in order to complete its task. So by 8 minutes P1 has completed its task. So next what will start? From 8 minutes the P2 process will start. Fine. So at what time the P2 process got its CPU in the sense? At 8 milliseconds. So at 8 milliseconds CPU got the processor. So how much time, at what time it has arrived in the sense? Minus 1 millisecond. At what time P2 process arrived in the sense? 1 millisecond. So 8 minus 1 is the 7 milliseconds. So what is the response time of a P2 process in the sense? It is a 7 milliseconds. So 8 is nothing but at what time the CPU has given a chance to P2 process. At what time the CPU has given? P1 has completed its task by 8 milliseconds. At 8 milliseconds, CPU has given chance to processor P2. Fine. So after processor P2, so it is going to complete its task for, it is going to do its task for 7 milliseconds. So totally 8 plus 7, how much it is? 15 milliseconds. So when the process is P2 completed, what the time? It completed its task by 15 milliseconds. Fine. So now at 15 milliseconds, like we have given the task to process P3. So at what time process P3 got the CPU? At what time in the sense? At 15 milliseconds process P3 got the CPU. And what is the arrival time of process P3? It is 2 milliseconds minus 2 milliseconds, that equals to 13 milliseconds is the response time of process P3. Got it? I hope you understood it. Fine. So this is how we are going to calculate the response time. The response time is nothing but the time at which the processor is allocated to a particular process at exact time. So here in this example, so P2, at what time P2 got the processor in the sense? At 8 milliseconds and 8 milliseconds. And how much, at what time it has arrived in the sense? 1 milliseconds. Process given by the time given by the CPU minus arrival time, we will be going to get the response time. This is how you are going to calculate the response time. And next one is the turnaround time. Turnaround time is nothing but burst time plus the waiting time. Burst time is nothing but the time required by the process to complete its task plus how much time it has waited in ready queue or in the for any IO process, how much time it has been waited. That total we call it as an turnaround time. So here if you are going to take the processes P1, P2 and P3, fine. Process P1, fine. So process P1 is taking 2 milliseconds of time to complete its task, P2 is taking 5 milliseconds of time to complete its task, and P3 is taking 10 milliseconds of time to complete its task. So the turnaround time of P1 is, what is the turnaround time of P1 is? It is of 2 milliseconds. Why? Because, so if you are going to draw the chart, so at 0 millisecond, P1 process has entered. So P1 process has entered. When it comes to the 0th second, the CPU allocated to this P1 process, fine. So here when you have seen, then the turnaround time of P1 is 2. P1 turnaround time is 2. How? Means at 0th second only the CPU has been allocated. So it is, the waiting time of P1 is 0. It has not waited. So the burst time will be the turnaround time. So this is the burst time actually. Turnaround time is also the burst time. So as it is not waiting for anymore, so 0, then the turnaround time will be the burst time. And now if you are going to calculate for P2, so the turnaround time of P2 is 7 milliseconds, they said. So because process P2 has to wait for 2 seconds. Why? Because P1 burst time is 2 milliseconds. So 2 milliseconds process P1 has executed. Later on, at after 2 milliseconds, we have allocated process P2. Fine. So process P2 burst time is 5, and how much time it has waited? 2. Total time is 7. So the total turnaround time of process P2 is 7. This is how we will be going to calculate, like a burst time plus waiting time. Burst time plus waiting time will be going to give the turn around time. So when it comes to the process P2, what is the process P2 burst time is 5 milliseconds. How much time it has waited? 2 milliseconds. Why? Because process P1 needs 2 milliseconds of time in order to complete its task. So 5 plus 2 is equals to 7 milliseconds. And now if you have taken process P3, now at 7 milliseconds P2 needs the time, and here process P1 needs 2, 7 plus 2, 9 milliseconds. Fine. And when it comes to the process P3, so here the process after 2 seconds the CPU will be going to, and its turnaround time will be 7 milliseconds. Similarly, the time required process P3 will be 17. Why? Because so process P3 burst time is, what the formula is? Burst time plus waiting time. Process P3 burst time is 10 plus what? How much time it has waited? Like 5 plus 2, 7 milliseconds of time. Totally 17 milliseconds of time the P3 has waited. So that is the burst time, turnaround time. Turnaround time is the time, total time spent by the processor from coming in ready state for the first time and completion its execution. So the total time we call it as a turnaround time. Next one is the waiting time. So waiting time is the time which the process spent in the ready state. So in the ready state we will be going to have, and in running state we will be going to have the processor. Here CPU will be there. Here we are going to have the ready state. Fine. So how much time the processor has waited in the ready state, waiting for the CPU. So waiting for CPU, we call it as a waiting time. Fine. For example, here the process P1 arrival time is 0 milliseconds. Process P2 arrival time is 0 milliseconds. Process P3 arrival time is 2 milliseconds. Like we have to calculate the waiting times of all the process. So here process P1 waiting time is 0. Why? Because at 0 millisecond, at 0 at the time the process P1 has entered, so it has not wait for anything. So what is the burst time of process P1? Burst time in the sense the time required by the process to complete its task. So it is 8 milliseconds. So at 8 milliseconds process P1 completed. Then we have allocated a process P2 at 8 milliseconds. Fine. So process P2 needs how much time? 7 milliseconds. Fine. So 8 plus 7, how much? 15 milliseconds of time. At 15 milliseconds of time, process P2 completed its task. And then at 15 milliseconds, we have given the chance to P3. P3 needs 10 milliseconds of time. So 15 plus 10, so 25 milliseconds of time, the P3 is going to be completing its task. So here, when we are going to calculate the waiting time, as we all know, as process P1 entered at 0 milliseconds, so the waiting time of process P1 is equals to 0. So it took the time of, how much time it has taken? 8 milliseconds of time it has taken to complete its task. Now at 8 milliseconds we have given our chance to process P2. P2 has to wait for how much time? 8 milliseconds. So, and the arrival time of P2 is 0. So, what is the turnaround waiting time in the sense? A turnaround time minus burst time. So, here turnaround time in the sense how much time it has been waiting. So, process P2 arrival time is 0 here. 0 minus 8, which is going to be 8 milliseconds. When it comes to like a process P3, the waiting time of process P3 is 13 milliseconds. Why? Because process P2 executed for 8 milliseconds of time and process P1 executed for 8 milliseconds and process P2 executed for 7 milliseconds. Totally 15 milliseconds of time. And what is the arrival time of P2, which is of 2 milliseconds. So 15 minus 2 is equals to 13 milliseconds of time. This much time the process P3 is going to be waiting for. Let me give a small example. Suppose I had a work in a bank. Fine. I had a work in a bank. So at 2 2 p.m. sharp, I entered into the bank. Fine. 2 p.m. I entered into the bank. But this is me. This is me. Before me, two persons are there. So each person took 10 minutes of time to complete his transaction. At what time entered? At 2 p.m. I have entered into the bank, right? Before me, two persons are there. Each person is going to take 10 minutes of time. So how much time I have to wait? Totally 20 minutes of time I have to wait. Fine. When I get the chance, in order to talk with the bank manager, what is the time? It is of 2:20. Why? Because me arrived at 2 p.m. Before me, two persons are there. Each is going to take 10 minutes of time. So at the time when I am talking with the manager, in the sense at 2:20, what is the waiting time? In the sense I got a chance at 2:20 minus at what time I entered? At 2 p.m. I entered. So what is the waiting time of me here? 20 minutes of time. So this is how I can give you a simple example for the waiting time. So waiting time in the sense when the process has arrived. So from there, how much time it has waited and at what time the person has responded, that what time that person has responded, that time minus like how much time, at what time this is going to happen, is going to calculate the waiting time. So waiting time is nothing but the turnaround time minus burst time. Burst time means time taken by the process in order to complete its task. So here we have calculated the turnaround time. Turnaround time means burst time plus waiting time. That we call it as a turnaround time. So here, if you want to find the turnaround time, we need to have burst time plus waiting time, which is going to give the turnaround time. So what is the burst time of P3 process? What is the burst time here? We are P3 process burst time is 10. How much time it has been waited? So here we will be going to have plus 3 milliseconds. So that total time minus burst time, how much time it is going to recover, in the sense 10 milliseconds of time. So this is how we'll be going to calculate the waiting time of each and every process. So at what time the processor is going to get the CPU time minus how much, plus at what time, how much time it has waited, minus what the actual time it is in need of. So the total you will be going to get the burst time. This is how you will be going to have different times in order to calculate, or in order to have the perfect exact time, at what time the process has entered, how much time it has been taken in the CPU to execute its task, and how much time it has been waiting in order to complete its task. All the times we are in need to calculate. So in the next class, we'll be going to have the scheduling algorithms. In the scheduling algorithms, you will be going to look after all the times, like what are the different scheduling algorithms. So what are the advantages of one algorithm over the other? What is the drawback of one algorithm? Why we have chosen the next algorithm? All these things you will be coming across the scheduling algorithms. So the different objectives are like, these are the objectives what we have discussed. These objects should be satisfied in order to have the good scheduling. So what are the policies, good policies to schedule a process, in the sense Like what are the good policies in the sense we have to maximize the throughput. Throughput is nothing but number of instructions executed per unit time, we call it as a throughput. Minimize the response time. So the response time should be low. We shouldn't wait for hours and hours together in order to get the response. That response time should be low. And minimize the turnaround time. Turnaround time is nothing but like the whole time it has been waited, that time we call it as a turnaround time. Minimize the waiting time. So how much time we are waiting in the ready queue, that waiting time should be reduced. So how we are going to reduce that waiting time in the sense like waiting time in the sense here only now in this job in that ready queue we are going to wait. So if how we are going to reduce that waiting time in the ready queue in the sense if we are allocating less number of processes, so that waiting time is also going to be reduced. If more number of processes are admitted in the ready queue, like the waiting time is also going to be more. So if we are going to allocate less number of processes in the ready queue, the waiting time is also going to be less. So these are the objectives and these are the policies, and how we are going to calculate the arrival time, response time, turnaround time, waiting time. So all these things are going to be done when we are going to do the scheduling algorithms, different types of scheduling algorithms. That's all for today. Thank you all students. Have a great day.